corporate tax rates are not going to change and balance the budget, but they can certainly help. And yeah, it'd be wonderful to get if we could get them down to 15%. Now, I think the president has probably come off of that particular figure recently, but I'd like to get them down. You know, if we could get them down to 25% or 20%, this country would turn around, I think, overnight.
Did you catch that? It was like an aside. Orrin Hatch's interview with our Adam Shapiro. 20-25%, that would be good. Well, it would be. It would be obviously a lot lower than it is now, but almost summarily dismissing the 15% sort of bottom line figure that the president and his people still have kind of on the books for the time being. To Forbes Media Chairman Steve Forbes on what to make of that. If that's his baseline, it's a lot higher than the other base. It's better than where we are, I grant you, but what did you make of that?
Can't negotiate with yourself. You got to go out there, put a strong bill, 15%, do the other good stuff they want to do. And on the personal side, if you don't want to get in the weeds on it, just do a 20% across the board tax cut the way Ronald Reagan did. Just sweep it across the board and do it. Don't get caught up in the Congressional Budget Office saying we can't afford it. We can't afford not to get this economy moving. And I guarantee if you get this economy growing at 4%, 3.5%, which we can, that solves a lot of problems. We had that growth rate, historic growth rate in the last 10 years, we'd have a balanced budget today.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. But, I mean, Republicans, by and large, are not on that page because they all insist revenue neutral, deficit neutral. You've heard all the various claims that you have to pay for these things. Well, by definition, that means you're not going to get a lot of bang for the buck, right?
Well, they don't fully realize when you make an investment, it doesn't happen overnight. When Trump was in real estate, he announces a building. It takes years getting the permits, getting the construction done, all the things you have to do. And then it happens over several years. So this idea that overnight it's got to be revenue neutral over an arbitrary period.
So you, Steve Forbes, could live with deficits that near term get worse before they get better. That, in other words, the revenue that comes from tax cuts sometimes can be years out. But it comes. Now, you and I know the history of Washington, that they'll spend that and every penny afterwards. But there's no mystery that it creates a lot of revenue.
Absolutely. In the 1980s, after Reagan's radical tax cuts, revenues were 50% higher at the end of the decade income side than at the beginning of the decade. And the key thing they should look at, does this get the American economy growing, better paying jobs for the American people, wages going up? If it does that, forget all this budget neutrality, Congressional Budget Office stuff. Do it right for the country and move with it.
What do you make of this health care, you know, speed bump, whatever you want to call it?
They should realize on something as complicated as that, you make a start. The Democrats waited 40 years patiently, step by step. When they got a setback, like with Hillary Care, they came back, started with children, and kept moving, step by step. So see, this is the same process, step by step, to repeal this thing.
So you might not like this version, but you can keep tinkering with it.
You can keep moving, just the way they have. Take a page from their book and use it to our advantage.
But you know what bothers me with this measure? I think big government types won. The only difference is this is less big than the last version, but it's still big. It's still an enormous federal government commitment.
This is where, if they're smart, they give real flexibility to state governors to make changes on Medicaid. You're already starting to see it happen. Kentucky, real radical big reforms. Where actually you save money and patients are happier because they have more control over the dollars.
What if it's a state like California, run by a Democrat who might not be so predisposed?
But then you have the contrast, and then you go back to Congress 2 years from now saying, look what these states have done, look what these states have done, we're going to push those that worked. Just like we did in welfare reform.
Fails, and
welfare
they can't
reform
get their act
started
together.
with Wisconsin.
No, you're right.
And
if
so
it fails and they can't
get
their act together, do you think they move on to tax cuts, or is that impossible at this late stage?
If they don't get a big tax cut, they're all going down next year, and no one will shed a tear for their fate.
I think you're right about that. Steve Forbes, thank you very, very much.